Morning Tip.
Good afternoon. It is January 16th, 2024. You're listening to a Little Column A, Little Column B, hosted by Will Limonos and co-hosted by Zach Bishop. How are you doing today, buddy?
What's going on, Will? I am doing pretty super today, but that super wild card weekend, that was not so super. I am wondering if the NFL next year is going to have to officially change its name to mediocre wild card weekend, or maybe just football wild card weekend. 5 out of the 6 games, absolute blowouts. Now, we did have upsets. Would you prefer blowouts that are upsets, or would you prefer more drama and close games and then the favorites still moved on?
Well, all right, I'm going to give you a then and now sort of answer, because if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd be like, no, these upsets are terrible. We don't want this at all. But in the current state of the team I root for and support in the New England Patriots, I think it's in favor of me to say, no, the underdogs are great, because that seems like what we're going to be for the next couple of years, and I like it. I suppose in this case I didn't have a dog in the race. I didn't have a team I was rooting for or really against. There's a couple teams where I was rooting for basically both teams, but boy, did I get some joy out of watching the Eagles and Dallas lose this week. It's a sickness. It's really, I shouldn't be proud of this. I shouldn't feel good about this. This should be concerning, like you were saying, and yet there's kind of a smile from ear to ear of being like, I can't, because they got their ass kicked too. It wasn't just they lost.
I'm beginning to think maybe the NFC East wasn't that good this year.
Well, maybe the Bears are in better shape than we thought. You know, they have 2 of the best teams in the league in their own division.
Right?
Well, yeah, maybe. Like, how crazy do you get with all this? With Green Bay moving on over Dallas and Detroit, you know, kind of getting it done and really eking out a tight win against the Rams, but overall looked like a really solid playoff quality team. I guess the Dallas thing is a little bit more shocking. I think we've seen the sinking ship of Philly over the last couple of weeks, and it's been known.
Couple weeks. It's been like over a month now. They went 5 for their last 6.
So are you more shocked that Philly lost or Dallas lost?
Dallas.
And is it who they lost to as well? Because Jordan Love, I haven't exactly been the biggest fan of on this podcast. I mean, you run back the tape, and I'm not looking real good right now. I don't know how you feel about what you've said in the past, but I didn't think that could happen. I thought there were some vulnerabilities that maybe they'd get a little sneaky in this game, and you know, if Dallas made a couple too many mistakes or a couple errors or who knows, something silly like that, just to give Green Bay a little bit of an advantage here. But this was a beatdown. Dallas has played from behind this entire game, and Dak threw for 403 yards. I don't know what you correct about all this other than just play better. I mean, where do you even start with what went wrong with this team? Was it the defense? Was it the offense? I know they scored 32 points, and it's almost like they showed up just to have like a decent, you know, save face a little bit in the score. But this was a blowout from the get-go.
I mean, 16 of those were in the fourth quarter. That's complete garbage time. I think some of the surprising is not just that they lost, it's that they were awesome at home the whole year, and that Green Bay jumped on them, and it wasn't even close. It was, all right, Green Bay scores once. All right, I think it was the first drive. All right, that happens. You know, would prefer not to. Cowboys are really good usually when they get the lead and can just front run. But this time they did not. And then it's like, oh, Green Bay scored again. Oh, now Dak throws a pick 6. It just, the wheels just absolutely fell off in a way that I didn't think was going to happen to Dallas, even though it seems to happen to Dallas every single year.
It felt like they got the team you would have wanted to play going into the playoffs too. I mean, they got the 7th seed. This is the last team in Green Bay, and it wasn't like they were the hottest team, you know, that just clawed their way in, and then, you know, they won their last 7 games or something just to have a chance to get in, and then the last day they got some help and snuck in. Like, this wasn't a team that had any momentum at all and came in like this was, you know, round 2 of their Super Bowl run. Just
as well as this is Jordan Love's first playoffs. So he's a playoff rookie. So you also thought, okay, Dak's been there before. You know, McCarthy's been there before. They've both had their struggles, but you got an idea. But Dak just didn't look very good.
Well, despite what you want to say, being more shocked with Dallas, I actually thought the Philadelphia performance was even more embarrassing. You want to know how many third downs Philly converted?
7.
0 for 9. You want to know how many fourth downs? You know, tush push. This is the team. Maybe they went for a lot of fourths, right? Like they probably didn't really care about third down or just inched it a little bit closer so they get it. So how many fourth downs do you think they got?
I think they got one.
0. 0 for 2.
Ooh. Oh for two. I thought they were 1 for 3. I thought they had gotten one. I know they missed the 2 point conversion, and then there was another one that it's just so funny. Like midway through the year, that was a storyline that we're gonna have to we're gonna have to get rid of this play because it's unstoppable. It's just give the defense a little bit of time, and they're gonna figure it out.
I actually thought Devontae Smith was somewhat unstoppable in this game. If like he still had a good game, it's that they had nothing else, and there was a lot of desperation when he did get. But I thought he was really good. I was still really impressed. Being solo out there, there's no AJ Brown on the other side. You're getting a lot more attention. Your team's trailing, and the other team knows that they're just focusing on you. So for him to have 8 receptions, 148 yards, I thought that was at least an applauded performance, and that alone is really the only applause that team deserves at this moment. But some shocking losses, some shocking matchups.
The Eagles tackling was just so terrible. I just want to touch on that before we move on. Just it was almost like when you're watching a movie and they're trying to up how good the other team is, and like the defense can barely even touch them, and they're going for these dives and they're not even close. And you mentioned it, the not converting on third down. It wasn't that they weren't getting to these guys. It was that they were, and they just weren't tackling. It looked awful. I don't know what exactly the problem was, and it just repeatedly happened over and over again. I think they had a graphic in the second quarter that they're already showing number of missed tackles. That's never a good graphic to have at any point in the game, let alone in the first half.
I was watching the Manning cast, and during one of probably the most atrocious quarters of tackling, Ray Lewis was the guest on with both of them, and it was almost like he was interrupting everybody and being like, "I can't believe the tackles. Like they're this is bad. Like this guy is supposed to slow him down so the other guy can tackle, and nobody's doing that. They're all going for arm tackles and just doing a very unfundamental thing, and it's concerning that was your playoff performance.
Also want to remind you that if this wasn't the warmest game, this was close to the warmest game of all the games going on. So it was not a weather situation of it was really cold and weren't prepared or weren't wearing the right gear or turf or something. This was down in Florida. This was the warmest possible game compared to some of the other ones we were dealing with.
Well, the game was in Tampa Bay, but with the home kind of field advantage, there was also a ton of wide receiver and tight end drops that just killed
by the Buccaneers.
This is the Buccaneers offense, and yet they were still able to overcome a bunch of just Mike Evans. There were some real bad drops, and yet it just felt like if they made
it could have been even worse.
It should have been worse
for the Eagles.
It really should have been.
Yes,
it really should have been. This could have gotten way out of control. They could have had a Mike Evans game that was memorable. This was a forgettable one, and I think he'll still bounce back hopefully in this upcoming week. But I mean, 32-9 for Philly to close out the year like this. It's not great. And the coaching situations with both of these guys we're going to get to after we make our picks, but they are certainly in jeopardy. And with the amount of coaching availabilities, I'd say a new hires available, it'll be interesting to see if either of those teams are making those sort of decisions going forward. But let's kick off our first picks here on Saturday at 4:30. The normal way to kick off football for the playoffs is Houston plays the first game. So 4:30 Saturday, Houston at Baltimore. Baltimore on the bye, doing a nice job all season, getting to watch everyone kind of duke it out week one here. But Houston, C.J. Stroud coming out of nowhere and just blowing out Cleveland. I think I'm going to mostly remember this as the Joe Flacco comes back to life game where back-to-back pick sixes. You can't even make that up. It was like karma just adding all the way back up and being like, no, we can't anoint Joe Flacco as the chosen one. We have to balance it back out to what he's always been. And to just compound it all into one game felt very brutal. But I am impressed by CJ. I think that's a fantastic story and an awesome draft pick. He's, I think, the youngest quarterback to ever win a playoff game. We'll see how long that holds up, but that's if you're Houston, this is a dream season, is it not? Like, this is best case scenario, and yet you're running into a buzzsaw in the Baltimore Ravens. I'm not worried about Baltimore here. I think this is a great game to see Lamar versus CJ. I'm going to go with Baltimore. I just think that the experience is going to add up, but I am excited for this game, and I think Houston has a lot of things to be excited about. Who are you going with this game?
I'm going to go with the Ravens as well. I think the Texans already exceeded expectations, getting into the playoffs and winning a game. like you said, Flacco just fell apart. The defense didn't travel. There'd been some trouble this year. I thought that they'd be able to get it together for a playoff game. That was not the case. Ravens are going to be all rested up. But I agree. If you're the Texans, you were in the playoffs not that long ago, and then everything kind of fell apart, and you figure you're going to be in purgatory for a while, and then you get a high draft pick, you draft your quarterback, and it sure looks like you got a quarterback for the future that not a lot of teams can say that, and you made the playoffs this year. It's not even this guy looks pretty good, and there are flashes, but we went 8-9, and we'll try again next year. It's like, oh no, there's already stuff you can build on. A playoff win. There's a lot of teams that haven't had a playoff win in a while, or have just recently got playoff wins in a while.
They're doing this without Tank Dell, and I also would like to just point out the Deshaun Watson trade wasn't the most recent thing, but it's such a bullet dodge, and it's such an advantage. It's such a thing that they won. Like, they're still playing with house money after that. So shout out to all of them. It'll be an interesting game, though. Do you think they have any chance in this one? Is this going to be tight, or are we getting our normal blowouts, as you pointed out this past week?
I think the Ravens are going to blow them out. 2 scores.
All right, so we both got Baltimore. Next game, Saturday night, 8:15, Green Bay Packers at the San Francisco 49ers. Jordan Love versus Brock Purdy. I do like the quarterback matchups that we kind of ended up with. Like, they all just feel like they're in the right weight class, and it's a fair kind of assessment. We already kind of talked about the Green Bay dominance of Aaron Jones coming back to life. I mean, 3 touchdowns for him, 3 touchdowns for Jordan Love. At Dallas, it was just a complete disaster. I'd like to think Green Bay could carry this momentum and that it's really going to matter, but the San Francisco defense is going to be so much better than whatever Dallas put out there, and this offense just saw everything that the Green Bay defense was doing. And let's not forget the Packers did still put up, or they give up 32 points. I know it was at the end of the fourth quarter here, but this is going to be a far more superior matchup with the San Francisco 49ers. So I'm going with the San Francisco. I felt like it was all chalk last week too, and this seems like a scarier way to not go chalk this week. I'll give you credit if you're willing to jump on board here, but which bandwagon are you on this week?
I'm going to go with the 49ers. They've looked good all year, except for that one little swoon that they had when they had some injuries. But looks like pretty much everybody is all the way healthy. Christian McCaffrey's been practicing this week, so if he's ready to go, I just don't see how the Packers are going to be able to build off of what they did last week, where 49ers were in position last year to make it to the Super Bowl before Brock got hurt, and now you're scrambling with quarterbacks at the last minute. It's almost impossible. So I think this year they got their team. I think they're motivated a little, maybe even more than some other teams, just on what happened last year, thinking they missed out on an opportunity and they're not going to squander it this year.
If you're Green Bay and the Texans, I suppose the Texans, the not having Tank Dell thing is kind of like having something going forward. But if you're either of these teams, like, what are you building off of this year? Is this is like a huge momentum thing right now? Now that you have a young quarterback in Jordan Love that's somewhat proven, same thing with CJ. Like, what kind of offseason moves do you think they should be doing? Like, they should be going all in at this point, or are we still rebuilding? Let's take it easy. Let's get some draft picks and see what we get.
I think with the NFL, when you have the quarterback still early on, you have to go. You have to just green light, gas all the way, because as soon as the quarterback matures and then you really know that he's the guy, you got to pay him. And then you just can't be paying other guys. So having a quarterback on a rookie deal is just a huge advantage. And teams are taking advantage of it in the past. The Seahawks were able to do it with Russell Wilson, where they were able to really shore up the defense and have a really dominant defense because they didn't have to pay a premium for a more veteran quarterback, but still have the output of someone that would be a veteran quarterback.
All right, next game, Sunday, 3 o'clock. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions. Detroit somehow getting another home game out of all of this. It's working out real well for them. It was a hell of a game watching them battle against the Rams. The Stafford Goff back and forth, and the way this is kind of being judged as if like Goff didn't win a Super Bowl, and he didn't win one this weekend either. Like, he just won a playoff game, and it's like, oh, they won the deal, and It's like, no, Stafford and the Rams, they won a Super Bowl. You don't get to ever say you stole an argument from them until you win a ring yourself. So
But you're talking to a team that in recent memory has gone 0-16 and hasn't won a playoff game in 31 years. So just franchises have different expectations. So this is a huge step for them. I had Eminem doing a little pre-hype up video, all produced and everything, and there were a bunch of Detroit celebrities that were there. This was a big deal for them. That crowd was pumped.
Look, huge deal. Can't argue the importance of the city and the value of having that of something you want every year and you don't always get. And I just don't think you could ever argue that they won the Goff Stafford trade when Stafford won a Super Bowl. Like, that's the whole point of the trade. That's what we couldn't do with Goff. They almost did. If they'd won, we're probably looking at this completely different.
I haven't heard anybody arguing who has won the trade. Where, like you said, yeah, one of them won a Super Bowl. Like, it's kind of the end of it.
All right. Well, Tampa Bay's in trouble. I think this will be a fun game. Baker versus Goff. It's again a very, very much in your weight class here. I'm excited to see if Evans is going to be able to put up some points. And I did like that despite there were some blowouts, there was a lot of points this weekend. There were some frozen elements and some weather elements in a couple games, but there was at least some points being put up. I think we're going to continue to see some points this week. And I'm going to go with Detroit. I think they're going to outscore Tampa Bay. And maybe we won't see quite as sharp a Baker this time. I mean, there was definitely some shaky plays. There's a couple sacks that could have easily sabotaged them if Philly had their act together. But I'm going with Detroit. Who are you going with?
I'm also going to go with Detroit. I'd love to see Baker playing like he did, especially where last week he was hobbling around. I did not expect him to look this good, but he was moving around in the first half. But I think in the second half, Eagles started to get to him, and he was taking a lot more sacks. I think if the receivers and the tight ends are catching the ball, it could be much more interesting. And I would very much like it to be a competitive game, but I'm going to stick with the Lions.
All right, last shout out, Puka Nacua. We knew him from fantasy all year. Fantastic year.
Great rookie year.
9 receptions, 181 and a touchdown. You know, he hasn't done this before. This is first try. And it's that.
And he wasn't even a high draft pick. It wasn't like next year. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. He's coming in, going to be a top 5 pick is the expectation. So if he were to go on this run, you're expecting it. You're like, oh no, this guy really good. Or Puka, he came out of nowhere.
Look, I don't ever want to hear the draft pick thing again. You want to know who was drafted right before him?
Who?
The New England kicker.
Well,
I don't even know his name.
If you saw some of our quarterbacking this year, I think we could have had prime Randy Moss out there. I don't think it was gonna really make a difference.
Yeah, well, we could have had this guy, and instead we took a kicker whose name I don't even know, and I don't even think he's on the roster.
I'm not sure.
All right, next game. Had to sneak that in there. I saw that today. I don't even know if it's probably
I did
true.
not pick up on that.
Sunday, 6:30. Weird times on Sunday. Do we like this? It's not 1 and 4. We're going 3 o'clock and 6:30 East Coast.
I would prefer the 1 and the 4. I think that was more traditional, even during the playoffs, and that lines up with the normal schedule. But I get you're trying to get it into prime time, so I like it that it's at least earlier than normal.
We have the Kansas City Chiefs at the Buffalo Bills. Are the Bills back? They got the playoff wins. We got Josh Allen out there. We're 4 touchdowns total for the day, 3 throwing, 1 rushing, 203 yards. Beating up on Pittsburgh, which honestly I can't even lie to myself and say they beat up on Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh kind of snuck into this game towards the end there. There was some odd pressure, despite not really being in the game, that they were applying to Buffalo, I thought, towards the end. Wild weather both ways. Tons of snow in Buffalo. Frigid negative 29, 27 wind chill. Kansas City with Miami. I thought Tua had one of his worst games of the year. I thought Tyreek was still incredible with his one play that he was able to score their only touchdown off of that.
Why do you think that Miami didn't come up earlier to get acclimated to the temperature?
Do you think that would have helped?
I think that they were in trouble either way, but it does seem I just gotta imagine it's got to be some sort of factor. If you're coming from 70, 80 degrees to zeros, I mean, it's really hard. Like, we're not really built for that temperature in general, but it just seems that quick of a change. I think that was always a concern. You know, if you even look at just traditionally the Dolphins, I think this was the I don't remember this if this was the coldest or close, but it was in any of the games under 40 degrees. You know, the past 10, you know, they were 1-9 or something like that. It was just like all of the cold weather games did not go in their favor, and I just have to imagine it has to do something with getting it acclimated, and it just makes me wonder if other coaches would have done it differently.
I thought cold weather meant, you got to run the ball, and I thought Miami had the better running game. The weird part of this game is that they didn't have a running game. Like it wasn't
But
there.
they're not a power running team. I think when it's cold, that's the tradition is it's a power running, and you're really going to smash into guys and make the defense say, "Hey, I don't want to be out here. This is no fun." But the Dolphins are more of a finesse running team, and I said I was concerned that speed in the cold. I thought I said it was going to slow down.
If you're Miami, are you committed to Tua being your quarterback going forward?
I think you have to. I think he is at least average to above average. They definitely had some real highs this year, and I just think you can slip so much lower, and with those other skill position guys, you still need a quarterback. And are you willing to roll the dice? I mean, who are you gonna draft somebody? You're not gonna have a top draft pick, and that's the unknown. Where at least here you know what you have.
I just think he's really only good in the most ideal circumstances possible with a talented roster. And he's really only at his best when he's making his first decision quickly. He doesn't really stall and give.
He at least has positive qualities. There's a whole bunch of quarterbacks that don't even have positive qualities. It's all negative to, well, maybe next year he can do this. So I think you just have to think not just on, hey, is he the right guy for the job of, if we get rid of him, who's coming in?
Yeah, I don't know if I just like that I feel like he's just a fast test taker, but he's not really good at the test. Like it's an interesting scenario. It wasn't the greatest Kansas City Chiefs team either, and they looked great that day. I thought playoff Mahomes is a thing. I thought there was a little extra effort on everything. I thought Rashee Rice really showed up, and they desperately needed him, and they're going to need him every single game going forward because they don't. I don't want to pick on Kelsey, but he's either injured or something. He's just not the same, and that's fine. Guys get old. This league is brutal. The hits he's taken and the success he's had is still an incredible career. But if Rice doesn't deliver, this team isn't going to be able to win another game. And I think they got a decent chance to win this one. I'm actually going to pick the Kansas City Chiefs over Buffalo. I thought Buffalo was still really shaky against a Pittsburgh team that maybe didn't even deserve to be in the playoffs. And Buffalo certainly looked like the professional playoff team, like they've been there before, and I have some faith in them. But this Kansas City team has that same thing, and I just like it more. I think Mahomes has a little bit more of an X factor in him, and I think he has just enough to kind of outduel this. And I'm just waiting for Buffalo to make the next mistake. Who are you going with in this one?
Well, I guess we'll just go with all the same picks because I'm also going to go with the Chiefs. They are not going to be deterred by the weather because both teams play where it's really cold, so that's not going to be an issue like when the Dolphins came up. But I can't pick against Mahomes. I could see the Bills winning, but I think I'm going to feel sillier if on Monday morning coming to do the podcast if I picked against Mahomes and Mahomes won. He's been in this spot before, and it just seems like the Bills have been in this spot, and something happens. They're not at the Chargers level, but they just do something where you're just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Josh Allen, like, you're so good. Just throw the ball away. Don't throw it into double coverage. Why? Just some sort of mistake. I don't know if it'll be Josh. I don't know if it'll be special teams. Just something along the way will happen, and the Chiefs are just gonna make their way through and take advantage of it.
Either way, when it's all said and done, I think we've criticized both of these teams thoroughly throughout the year. There were moments where we were all on board. There was moments where people certainly jumped ship and they looked terrible. we are where we're supposed to be in some way. It's Kansas City, Buffalo. It's round 2 of the playoffs. The winner of this is going to have a chance to go somewhere and do what they really want to do. But this is a fun matchup. I always kind of get excited for this one. I think it's delivered good results in the past, and I hope this is a hell of a Sunday night game. I really do. I mean, I picked Kansas City to win, but one of these games has to be tight, and this would be the most fun one if it ends up being it. All right.
Like you said, we've seen it in the past where each quarterback gets the ball with less and less time, and you're wondering, is this too much time? Is this enough for this quarterback? And it could very easily come down to, hey, who has the ball last?
If these two are able to deliver basically a college overtime 2-minute drill between each other again, I don't even know. Like, we should just have this every week. Like, we should get rid of all the other teams and just let that happen every single time. All right, big exciting stuff for NFL this week. But this was hardly the main story of the week. There have been a coaching carousel of firings, of parting ways, of retirements, and a whole bunch of potential of new coaching vacancies. I suppose the big news is that Belichick and the Patriots have decided to part ways. There was a press conference. Robert Kraft was there. They answered no questions. It was the most New England thing ever. And I was almost happy of the way it ended. I for sure thought that just the competitive nature of us all was going to really force a trade out of all of this. But in some ways, that was almost going to damage and make Bill's life a little bit harder. And I don't know if he necessarily deserved that. And perhaps that's losing a little bit of competitive nature and not knowing that. But I really don't have a problem with it. I thought the press conference is fine. I'm a little concerned on our new hire and then our new direction of this team, but we'll kind of get to that. This was hardly the only coach that moved on today. There was Pete Carroll and Nick Saban also retired, but let's start with the Belichick stuff. Your kind of thoughts on, I guess, Bill no longer being a Patriot. I mean, this is really the only divorce of my life was Tom Brady, and then now this is the Belichick divorcing the Patriots here. I don't really have a whole lot of conflicts in my life that have separations like this. Everyone's kind of stood pat, and this is going to be a big change. How are you adjusting to this, and what are your thoughts on Bill's future?
It was not a fun press conference. It did not bother me that they didn't take any questions because all the questions were going to be, Bill, like, where are you going to go next? And it was answered right in both of their speeches that he would be leaving the Patriots, but would be continuing to coach, or was still had an interest to coach. I can imagine some team is interested in him. 3-time coach of the year, but even more importantly, 6-time Super Bowl champ. Watching the press conference and just knowing the press conference was coming and still just having that denial of, in the same way when hearing the Brady news a few years ago, where just the denial, like, oh no, like this will never happen. We're going to keep doing this. We're going to figure this out. This is all going to work out. And then even in like the days after, kind of just hitting me of, and just since we've done this just not that long ago with Brady, is you have this initial, he's not going to be here anymore. Then we're going to have the second blow that is, he is going to go coach for X team. And then there's the off season, and then it's going to be, firing up red zone. And it's going to be, he just interviewed with the Falcons, and Bill Belichick on a different sideline, and then you get hit again. I think both of us were not handling it the best. We got in an argument about Celtics coaching, which I think we were both really just angry about Bill Belichick. So I think we're not handling it the best, but I think we're just going to have to figure it out.
Is there a team you really dread him going to, or is it all of them?
No, it's not any of. It's not all. I think it's just not the Eagles.
I just think the way. I mean, I don't even think they have a bad coach. That's kind of the weird part, is that this team, I think roster wise, just fell apart, and then defensively the coaching is an easy flaw. But I think even if you ask their current head coach, it was Sirianni there, he would redo the defensive coordinator thing all over again this year as well. Like, that's such a hard thing to do during the season, to throw Patricia in and then Big Dom back and then blah blah blah, all of that. And really, the results of it didn't matter what the coaching was going to be. This team had some injuries.
Well, even more of AJ Brown was hurt, and Jalen Hurts dislocated his finger last week. Like, didn't throw all week. and I believe he's had a knee injury for most of the year. One of those. Well, if you're out there playing, you should be able to play. But also, well, why wasn't he running? Why wasn't he playing as well as he did the year before? It's like, well, he's got a knee that needs to recover. Hopefully in the in the off season. So I think it's the Eagles. Do you have a team that you specifically would not want him to be a part of?
I don't want him to go to Dallas. I feel like that's going to have a coaching vacancy any second now. I don't know how you're going to hold on to McCarthy after what. I mean, they weren't even in that game at all. Like, that game was over immediately. And it's just, they were favored. They were at home. They had a pretty strong regular season. It's just, none of it matters. If you show up with a performance like that, like, I think you're in jeopardy for being fired. Like, there's just no other excuse. They didn't have the injuries. You just mentioned a whole bunch of injuries on Philly, but what did Dallas have? They didn't have. Like, what is their excuse? I just don't see one.
I don't think they really have one.
Like, I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's likely that Belichick will go there, but it does look like that they may have a coaching vacancy, and there's something about Dallas and being that center of attention that I could see Bill being attracted to and so unattracted to at the same time. I don't know what he is.
I don't know. I don't know why, but for some reason Dallas doesn't bother me as much.
I also.
And the funny part, we're both naming teams that still, as of right now, still have a coach. So.
Well, I guess I'm just saying, I'm going to root for him. Are you going to root for him to get this record? Like, I want him to have the wins record.
Yeah.
So if you really are going to do that, and you kind of factor in his age to some degree, he's got to go to a team kind of like what Philly or Dallas had this year to get this done in like 2 seasons. Because I think when we push this to 3, we're playing with time that I don't know if we can necessarily guarantee. And I think we can get 2 more years, and I want him to happen in the next 2 years. So I'm just rooting for him to go somewhere that seems a little bit farther along. I don't want this to, like, could you just imagine if he goes to Atlanta or Washington and he doesn't get it done in 3 years? Like, how miserable that's going to be. Like, that's not going to be fun for anyone. And then he's going to get fired, and it's going to be. I want him to get it. So he's got to go somewhere and actually get it done. And if it was a limited talent in New England that it was holding him back, I want him to go somewhere with some actual talent. So if it ends up being Philly, so be it. It's really what I'm
that's
at.
why I don't think he'll. That's why I don't think he'll go to Washington. Maybe Atlanta. I think they have a lot of. I mean, we all know about the skill position players, and if he thinks he can use those, but they don't have a surefire quarterback. So, I mean, he already interviewed with them, but I think there's going to be more on the horizon.
Yeah, I hated that Atlanta celebrated like they hung a banner this weekend that they interviewed Belichick, just letting the world know he's here. He came to interview with us, like this is all official or anything like that. And then they interviewed Harbaugh. They interviewed someone else this week too, or is it Pete Carroll?
I think the best joke that got fired off on that was Nora Pinciotti from The Ringer when replied to that on X saying, from the Atlanta interviewer side, say, "Hey, could you tell us about a time that you went through a difficult situation?"
Yeah, great. Yeah,
I think that was my favorite. Where big of them. I mean, it's all a business, but that Super Bowl was not that long ago, and that owner was down on the field. He thought he had a Super Bowl, and he wanted to be on the field, and he went down. He went down too early.
Yeah. No, it's the other thing with this Belichick thing is, he was doing he had a whole lot of jobs. He's wearing a lot of hats in New England, and I think the GM job is an easy one to be critical of, that it hasn't been the most successful thing. So going to all these destinations we just named, all these places, they have current GMs right now, and we were already kind of axed off the coaches that are still actively employed. Are we axing off GMs too? Like, I don't know if anyone's going to give him the entire car keys to everything anymore. And I don't know, maybe that's the only reason I think he does end up at like Atlanta or Washington, where they're just like, well, we're kind of desperate enough to take you for anything. Like, if we want to just clean house here, we'll do that. But I don't know if that's the smartest job for him or anyone else. So that's going to, I think, factor into his actual decision more than it really should. Like, I wish he could just take a roster, man, and just go win. Like, forget about all that stuff. Just go out and coach.
Do you have a favorite Belichick moment? It's a little tricky because it's not the same as Tom Brady. It's the same as an athlete. where it's a little more behind the scenes.
Well, on to
And
Cincinnati. That's Belichick, right?
yeah,
I
isn't
think
that funny? That was after a loss. That was after a bad loss, and he just didn't want to take questions. But that is one of his most famous quotes. And then we went on to win the Super Bowl that year. So it turns into, but at the moment, that was a this thing might not be working. That was earlier in the year, if I'm not mistaken.
I just thought it was great. Of like, I don't care what anyone says right now. I'm on to Cincinnati. Like, I'm putting it behind. None of this is going to be productive. You guys can get all your little stories, your little podcast tweets, and whatever. I'm on to Cincinnati. Like, you guys are wasting your time if you think you're going to get anything out of me, or if there's going to be anything you're going to learn out of this that's going to help prepare this team for next week, or overanalyze the crap that's happened in the last whatever weeks. It was great.
One of my favorites, and this was more the prep that he did. I can't remember what year it was, but we were playing the Ravens in the playoffs, and we did a scheme. I guess we lined up in a way that was deceiving, where we had offensive linemen covering up, or it was confusing, and then we leaked out a couple of times and got first downs to offensive linemen. And Harbaugh was so upset afterwards, but it was really a old rule, or it was a rule that wasn't implemented or wasn't used very often, that Bill and people keep saying over and over again, like, no one knows the rule book as well as Bill Belichick does. And that I believe that offseason they changed the rule specifically because of what Bill Belichick did. And I just love that he probably knew about that rule forever, but said, I'm going to hold on to this until we really need it. And the week before practice said, hey, we got to be prepared for this. And that was when he decided to use it, because he knew, I can only use this once. After I use this, I probably won't be able to do it again, because either they're going to change the rules or people are going to know about it. They're going to be aware of it. So that's one of my favorite moments.
There's going to be some tough shoes to fill, but I mentioned the urgency of us having a high draft pick and the season being kind of dire, that we're going to have to rebuild this team and make a whole lot of decisions. And the faster we get somebody in here, the faster we can start getting on the same page and make the decisions. Well, it turns out we already had that decision made. Gerard Mayo, I believe, had it written in his contract that when Bill left, he was going to take over. And Gerard Mayo is now our new head coach for the New England Patriots. I like keeping the cohesion of it all, but I'm also very, very worried and very, very familiar with the Belichick coaching tree. It's not the most successful, and a lot of other teams have taken a stab at it, of their second guessing or whatever else we let go of coordinators, and it hasn't exactly worked out for anyone else. I suppose Vrabel's a bit of an exception, and perhaps Mayo will be as well. But are you excited? Are you worried? Did you like that we already kind of had this in plan, and that we're kind of doing a similar Belichick way with a little bit of youth? Is that what you wanted, or were you hoping for a little bit more of an overcorrection and overhaul?
I'm not excited. I had mentioned that before. That I said once Belichick leaves, there's no one they can bring in that I'm thinking is going to be better than he was. So now we're bringing in rookie coach. Always a risk. I don't really know, what to think, because he's brand new. So when he comes in, I mean, how long of a leash does he have? I know when when we traded Doc Rivers and then we got Brad Stevens in, that came out of nowhere. He was a rookie coach. He was coming from college. We gave him I believe it was a 7-year contract, with the idea being, hey, if you're not good year one, that's not the expectation. Like, you're going to figure things out. This team is a rebuilding team. We got a high draft pick. Everyone's thinking we're going to take a quarterback. I guess we still are going to need a GM. That's also a little bit of a concern, that we have a coach before a GM. I think usually you do that the other way around, because the GM hires the coach. So, there's a little bit of trepidation there. But I just hope that they give him enough leeway. And the fans, we got to also be aware of it. If we start off 0-3, it's not just immediately, oh, you can't figure it out, he's garbage. Like, we got to give this guy some time to, figure things out.
It's not like Belichick was successful this year, and that's a little bit of a concern of keeping things similar. But I do like the Patriot way has to still mean the Patriot way, and it might have not have been what it once was the last couple of years, but it still could be. And I think this.
Well, we're gonna find out. We're gonna find out. Is it the Patriot way or is it the Bill Belichick way?
We're
And
gonna
it
find out for
could be that
sure.
it very much overlaps, but we are going to find that out.
I don't like it. I already feel like we're losing this altogether. It doesn't. I don't like that there's stories leaking. Also, that we weren't really treating Belichick the best of the last couple of years. I know he's not the greatest or easiest guy to work with either. Right? There's certainly a Bill's way or Bill's way, and I understand that. But it's been pretty successful. It's worked pretty good, and it doesn't sound like Robert Kraft's son is really as big a fan of Belichick as he could have been. And I'm just curious to see if the stories are going to come out, and I just don't like the direction and what that's really representing. This is a guy that gave us everything we could ever really ask for, and
Dude,
you just take the
he
rest.
not just going to the Super Bowl. Every every 4 years on average, he won the Super Bowl. 6 Super Bowls in 24 seasons. That's crazy. 25% of the time.
Look, we could spend the whole podcast
And
talking about
this is in the modern era. That means there's free agency, there is salary cap. You just can't pay guys whatever you want. You have to pay a certain amount. You have to wheel and deal. And he was not just the coach; he was also the GM during that. People are really taking shots at him for how the draft went the past few years, but GM is not just drafting players. You have to sign free agents. You have to do trades. You have to build a team. It's more than just drafting.
It's a lot. It'll never be done again. All right,
I
speaking
don't
of
think so.
it'll never be done again, he was not the only Hall of Fame coach to retire. I mentioned a bunch of other names, but Nick Saban is walking away from Alabama. And I can't even believe it. I actually thought he had a pretty good coaching year this year. We joked about how this is like his lowest year he's had in who knows how long, and that they're going to be even better next year. There's nothing to even worry about. And he's just done. He's not doing it anymore. I looking at the whole season differently. If we'd known this, I thought we would know this going in. I'm very shocked by this. Are you shocked by it?
I didn't see it coming. I did not realize that he was in any way unhappy or getting towards the end of his uh, tenure. I thought it wasn't like Alabama was pushing him out. Like you said, we had joked earlier in the year, like, oh, down here for Alabama, they only made it to the college playoff, where most teams, if they did that, that'd be a parade for their coach. But he is getting older. I'm not really super plugged into the Alabama, football team, but I didn't even hear any rumors, or it was just all of a sudden it wasn't this might be happening. It's just here's the announcement, and like you said, it was just one right after the other in just a 24-hour span.
My life has changed entirely. It's like, all right, who are the best coaches? It's like, well, man, I gotta reorganize. I gotta make a new list. Like I never knew. Like there was the quick answer was this guy and that guy, and as of right now, neither of them are coaching any teams. I do worry a little bit. I mean, we talked about how much of the Belichick way versus the Patriot way. How much of this is the Saban way, and how much of this is Alabama? Like, is Alabama in trouble right now? I mean, these aren't shoes I'd want to replace, but if you were one of the main recruits and one of the biggest things was you got to play for this guy and he's no longer there. How much of it is the program and how much of it was I get to play for that guy and look what he does? Like, is this a huge concern? Like, is the rest of the college world like kind of excited to jump on Alabama now?
I think that they are thinking there's a vulnerability there. I believe at least one of the wide receivers who had committed earlier in the week decommitted, and that's not unusual for any team because you're recruited a lot of times by the coach. Similar to the Patriots, they have already hired their new coach. They hired Kalen DeBoer. He was the Washington, so made it to the national championship. So if you're gonna pick a guy, it's not the worst guy in the world to pick. As well as I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was for recruiting. There's different star levels, and the amount of star level guys that you had on the team, each champion, there's like a certain number, and so Washington was definitely below that number. So might show that, hey, where Saban was really good at recruiting, this guy was really good at coaching these guys that were not at the same level. And so maybe with the Alabama resources, he will be able to bring them in. I don't know. Just like you said, the Belichick way, the Patriot way, the Alabama way, the Saban way. Saban was successful at a few different stops. I think that Alabama has also been a uh, uh, top tier program as well. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, we're seeing it's basketball, but Coach K left, and the recruiting, the infrastructure is in place. Duke is still getting the top recruits. They're still at the absolute top of the recruiting class every year. They're still a good basketball team. So I wouldn't think they would just absolutely drop off a cliff. But that's just one recent where you have a coach that's had a ton of success, has been there for a while, leaves, and it's not just an immediate drop off.
It just seems when you're kind of in the recruiting business, for college, like
Big time.
So it's the stability of being a heavy recruiting team. I mean, like you said, it's not going to go away, but I'm congratulating the coach of Washington for kind of getting this job, and I don't even think I blame him for jumping ship. I mean, this is Alabama. You have the chance to do. These are the shoes you get a chance to fill, and perhaps he can do even more for it. But the success that Washington had this year, like you said, that was a down year for Alabama. So it's
you bring up the recruiting in the past 5 years or so with a name, image, and likeness. I think recruiting has changed a lot, and Saban in his 70s. So he's been doing things a certain way for a long time, and you get into your routine, and we're seeing it in both football and basketball. Some of these guys that are on the older side may be calling it quits just a little bit earlier than you would think, and it could just be, hey, this game is just totally different. I don't want to learn the new rules. Where Kalen, this new coach, he's 49 years old. So for a coach, younger coach, so maybe he's willing to go and say, hey, these are the new rules. I'm going to be coaching for another 20, 30 years. I'm going to be the best at this. And at Alabama, they're going to have plenty of money to be putting towards these recruits through all of these legal channels now. And I think that it's going to be different, but I think that it will be up to him to have success. I don't think it will be because of Alabama that he does not have success.
All right, I don't know how you managed to do it, but you got me to do more college football talk in January. I thought it was like this nothing until fall. Like I couldn't do it, but then when a guy like that retires,
that's a huge. I mean, like you said, when you're making a list of best coaches, Nick Saban is up there, and a surprise retirement. We couldn't wait till September for that.
All right. Speaking of surprises, we're going to stay in the college sport aspect here and talk a little college basketball, of which I had a page of notes and I just threw it out. You know what I wrote down instead? I just wrote, nobody is safe. You're all on notice.
Upset City.
Nobody is safe. You're all on notice, and you all better watch out. Nobody's good at basketball. You're all just chopping off the newest head at the top of the table here, just getting knocked off one by one. I think 7 of the top 10 lost last week. It's hard to reassess because the numbers keep changing every day, and it's it's wild. I don't even where do you want to begin?
I got it for you. So I mentioned last week some games to watch, and then later in the week I had let you know. I said, hey, look out, there could be a bunch of upsets tonight. And you're like, oh, okay. And boy, did I call my shot there. And then Saturday there were even more. So here, I got it for you. The number 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25 teams in the AP poll last week lost to unranked teams. That doesn't even count the teams that lost to ranked teams. So a complete just everybody going down. There were storms everywhere. It was wild. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun because my team did not get upset. They did not play very well, but I avoided it. And when Duke avoids that, then it's awesome. What I did not like was, I think, like I said, I can't remember. It must be, I think it was Wednesday when there was all those upsets. There was the opportunity. UNC and UConn were both playing on the road as well, and they both won. And now we have the unfortunate situation that UConn is now the number 1 team in the country, and that is men's basketball, not women's basketball.
I'm not worried. Like I said, nobody's safe. This is all going to shuffle out and balance at some point. We're going to have some teams redeem themselves and get back in. We're going to have some teams that I think are continue to drop, and that we're going to say, hey, we got some real problems here, and they're getting figured out by who knows what. But it's such a wild game where I don't even know who's good, and we say like, oh, the number one team went down, and now they're the 10 seed, and it's like tomorrow when they lose as a 10 seed, it's like, well, they were only a 10 seed. Was they even that good? And it's like, well, 4 days ago they were the 1 seed, so I don't know. It's hard to keep track of. It's hard to say anything is set in stone for any long period of time. So congratulations to UConn for now. Do you think next week when we do the podcast they will still be the number 1 seed?
It's funny that you ask that because they are on my list for games to watch this week. On Saturday, UConn goes to Villanova, and that is one of my games of the week. So I think that they will win, but it is not a guarantee. That is going to be a tough game playing on the road. So especially once you become number 1, I think that there's a lot more attention. You're just having that number in front, especially it just seems the past few years has almost been a signal of, hey, I wonder who's going to lose next. Well, who got named number 1 recently? And then in the next 2 weeks, that team goes down. They have not held on to it for very long.
What other games we got to look out for this week? We got to get to the NBA. We got a lot of topics too.
Okay, these are all on Saturday. We have Alabama at Tennessee. We have Iowa State at TCU, the UConn at Villanova that I just mentioned, and BYU at Texas Tech. But then I also have for you, Will, would you like to hear some good news about Michigan State?
Don't give me the Izzo's son thing with the basket. It's a great story, but we're such a struggling team. I hate that this is becoming like the highlight of the season. Let's beat somebody.
What is it? What is this? What is this story? I had not heard this. What's the deal?
His son, he scored his first basket for Michigan State.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. It's great. We blew out a team.
News.
He managed to sneak and get some minutes on. I guess he's been on the team for I think it was 5 years maybe. Don't ask me how you managed to get 5 years of college again, but it's a cool story. I want to be happy about like, okay, we did this and we won against the other teams too. Like it's we're only celebrating that this guy scored now because the rest of the season's been garbage, and that's where we're at. So you got good news for me. I'll take it because the Illinois game tore me apart. We played just good enough to get into it, and it would have been like a good win because they played Purdue like the week before. It was right there. I was disappointed with this. So that's my frustration. But perhaps you have good news.
So the good news for you, and this is just funny because last week we were talking about how Izzo went on a rant and kind of unprompted said he hated analytics, he was against analytics, all the nerds. But that is not a two-way hate situation. The analytics love Michigan State. Michigan State is number 16 in KenPom, and they are number 22 in the net. So what that says is the analytics, they don't think that you're a terrible team. They think you might turn this thing around. So if you're, really down, just, there might be a chance. There might be a chance you turn this whole season around.
How much of that is going to help us actually get into the tournament? Don't we need actual wins?
You would think so, but the net is what they say. Where KenPom, that's his own guy. There's other analytics, they're their own guy. But the net, they've said that this is like the new RPI. Like this is how when they get into the room together, the committee, they're looking at quad 1 wins, quad 3 losses. They're looking at all of that, and that's how the net rankings are come up with. So it's not hard and fast that whatever the net ranking is, that's how the teams line up, but they do use it as a guide.
I feel like you're cornering me to say like the earth is flat. Like the eye test of this team, I'm like siding with Izzo. This is an underwhelming offense that has struggled to shoot all year, that has also now recently forgot how to play defense and is playing down to the level of teams that shouldn't even be scoring. And we just give up 90 points to teams that have no business getting 90. Say what you want about the numbers. I'm bitter about it all. I'm still on Team Izzo with the eye test is hard to watch and it's not looking great. And I don't feel like a 16 best team in the country. Do you? Like, or even 21 or whatever on the net. Like, I don't feel like that. I feel like we're in jeopardy of missing the tournament. I think that's how I'm feeling at this moment.
I'm just throwing it out there. I think it's funny that Izzo hates the analytics, but the analytics love Izzo.
All right. Can we get to NBA?
Mm-hmm.
You want to start with the good
Sure
news,
can.
the bad news, or the worst news?
Let's start with the worst news.
Well, the worst news of the week was easily the Jerry Krause ceremony. That was
Oof.
not a ceremony in any way. It was a bunch of drunken fans making drunk mistakes, and I don't know how else to describe it. Essentially booing a widow of Krause live at a ring ceremony. A successful team, like in-house ceremony. It's not like they were giving him a ring and he went and won it in some other team and he just returned his first time back to Chicago. And he also wasn't even there. This guy's bad. I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it actually is, but I just thought it was certainly the uglier story of the week that you shared with me. And I might have even kind of defended them of being like, well, they're fans at basketball games. They're not thinking. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, oh, that's just not a good look. Like nobody should be doing this. I don't even think Krause. I think he had bad media. I think if we were to redo all of that all over again, he would have aged a little bit differently in a different era, I believe. But what do you got on this one? I mean, this is just the bad news, the worst news of the week I had. So get me out of here. I'm sinking.
So yeah, to give just a little more backstory, the Chicago Bulls decided that they were going to do a Ring of Honor for the mid '90s Bulls. Had a ton of success. First problem, Michael Jordan wasn't there, Scottie Pippen wasn't there, and Dennis Rodman wasn't there. Well, those were those were the three main guys from those championships. If they can't show up, like you couldn't have done, hey guys, when can you show up? All right, well, they're too famous, they don't even want to show up. Okay, well, they did it while the Warriors were playing there, so Steve Kerr could be there. All right, okay, make do with what you have, but already, all right, you got a problem. They Phil Jackson was there. They introduced Phil Jackson. They cut him off early. I guess there wasn't enough time, so they had to cut his ovation early, as well as they didn't announce all of the players on the team. They just announced the team, and like all these guys are here, and then just the worst, the worst crappy cherry on top of all of this is they showed Jerry Krause, and you kind of hinted at it. Yeah, he passed away in 2017, so he's not even there. In his stead, his widow was there to accept the honor, and they showed Jerry at first, so they booed, and then they showed the widow, and so the boos carried over. It wasn't directly they saw the widow and immediately they were booing Jerry, but you could tell she was very upset, understandably. She wasn't expecting that. It was unfortunate, and for a little more of the history on it, it wasn't that long that the Last Dance documentary came out. Jerry Krause was the GM for the 6 championships. Now, at the end, it soured, and a lot of the blame has been put on him, and a lot of the blame in the Last Dance documentary, one being because he couldn't defend himself because he wasn't around. So you're hearing the owner, who since then has had very little success. I mean, Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah, that's about it. As well as Michael Jordan was also not a fan. So I think Jordan has made a lot of disparaging comments about him and in the documentary, so he took a lot of the blame. So I get where you were coming from when we discussed it earlier this week, saying, hey, like these are fans, this. And I do believe if you watch the video, once they actually do show his widow, you could tell she's very upset. The boos did seem to end pretty quickly and try to go to cheers, but the damage had already been done. It just all around just bad optics.
Let me ask you, if you're the widow, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, but do you think this was something she was excited to do, or do you think this was something they were begging her to show up for because they're trying to get as many people involved as possible, and that she was probably dreading this moment for a while, and not even expecting this, but just being like, why? This wasn't me, this was him. This is great. I understand the honor of it all, but there wasn't an excitement to be there, is my guess, for all this, and then for it to be this sort of night.
I would think that she would have been excited, and I don't know any of the interactions, but just thinking if you were around a team like that for a decade, they had to have done family stuff together. I believe I would have thought she'd known the players, the other staffing that was there. Like I said, Phil Jackson was there. I don't know if other coaches were there as well. I have to imagine there was just some sort of, it's almost like an office party, but at the highest level, that you had the success. It had to have been fun at some point, and you're just seeing people that you hadn't seen in a while. So I would think that, but that's a lot of conjecture.
Well, that's just the power of a Netflix documentary, which the NBA recently announced that they're doing a new one featuring a bunch of young stars. Who are they? You told me the players. I already forgot them.
It was all stars, but you were upset that it was too many Americans.
It's not. Look, if we're gonna get into the background of all these people, I just thought it'd be a little bit more diverse if we had some of the international guys. Like, there's some really good international guys, and assuming there is success to this, I don't see us slowing down from them. And that I'm just saying there's more international guys we can get in the future. We just gotta mix in a couple more. I don't have a problem with the list.
It will be Sabonis, LeBron James, Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, Anthony Edwards.
Yeah, no, it's a great spectrum of talent and different guys in different points in the career that have traveled and been to different places. Even some of the college histories are interesting on all these guys, or the international aspect. There's good stuff. If you're asking me if I could just handpick everybody, I'm picking like Luka, Embiid, Jokic, guys that are generally, or Shea, that maybe we don't know quite as much about, or we don't know the background of where they grew up quite in detail. I feel like I know everything else, and because I'm a diehard NBA guy, and I want to dig a little bit more into kind of the international stuff. But I'm not knocking the list. The list is fine. Do you think there's going to be future boos to some widow in the future because of this documentary?
Yikes.
Like, do we need to slow down these documentaries? Maybe we're causing more harm than good.
Yeah. I just now you're like mixing the two topics. I just don't know how you boo a guy that got you 6 championships. It just seems like if in 20 years you bring back Belichick and then he gets booed because of the Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi years, and just completely mistake all the other actual successful years. Where could you have won more? Maybe I don't know. Did he want more credit? Oh no! Like, powerful man wants more credit for things that he did. Like that's everybody. Everybody wanted more credit. So that's probably why the team fell apart. That is not a new thing. The disease of more that's been talked about all sorts of time. And then the Warriors holding on for so long, where it's like, hey, all these guys want more credit. Nobody wants to work as hard. You've already gotten it. But I don't think we're gonna have boos. I think this is gonna be a dud. I don't think it's for you and me, like I've mentioned before, with the football one. This is basketball adjacent. We're already watching basketball. We're already into it. I can't imagine that anything is really going to come out of this that is going to be that interesting. I mean, there's probably going to be some awesome Jason Tatum with his son Deuce moments, and there'll be a few headlines here and there. But I think overall, like, for us, it's not going to be something that we're watching and we're recapping on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm going to run through a couple quick topics here. NBA 2-night draft. We like that, right? More content, spread it all out. You don't want it? You don't want it?
Who's going to watch the second round?
Nobody. Nobody watches the second round anyways. They might as well just have it on another night.
I don't know how they're going to promote that.
The same way they promote.
I could see if they did, maybe if you did the lottery or the first 10 one night and then you did the rest of it, but just having the second round, like you said, not many people watch it. I'm a pretty avid fan, and it's like that's on mute, and then it goes pretty late.
I don't even watch it. I wait for the text message. I'll catch up on Twitter, and it's just a million times easier on a website because it's not really easy to keep track of it even live on TV. It's not a good like TV watch.
No.
It's a better like article read, like hours after it's over, and it all settles and all the trades like actually make sense. But that being said, the NFL has milked as much out of this as they can. You know how many sob stories they can air in 2 days in a row? Like that's what they're doing.
It's totally different in the NFL. They have, what is it, 7 rounds? So that makes sense to spread it out. And a second round pick in the NFL, I think, is much more likely to make a team than a second round pick in the NBA. I just don't know who it's for, because, like you said, you and I are pretty plugged in, and even you and I are just, I don't know, second round. How many of those guys are even going to be playing? It's more of, hey, check to see if your college guys made it. But and you're saying all these stories and all these sob stories, which I think in the past year or so they've tried to go away from after they've gotten some negative feedback on it. So if you're doing all these human interest stories, like, how are you getting those people to watch the second round? I just don't know how it lines up.
Yeah, I have no idea. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to watch an NBA draft when it's like, all right, I've watched every hour of this, and yet I still don't know where every player is going. Like, I couldn't have watched any more of this content, and yet there's so many unanswered questions watching it live that I have to go online or onto Twitter to figure out anyways. And it's like, why am I even watching this? I have to watch a commercial every 5 minutes. I have to, like, I could just wait, and I gain all the same information. There's no advantage of being the first one to know anything about a draft. So, like, the live aspect of all these shows is such a dud for me. So I don't really care. It's fine. If we're going to prioritize the second day, it's more NBA. More NBA, more content. Let us have it. Kawhi Leonard signed an extension. A 3-year extension. The leverage is gone. The threat I'm going to get up and leave is in theory gone. I kind of want to give him credit for having the balls to do it, and I want to kind of give him credit for doing this phantom recovery thing like 3 times in his career and kind of getting back to where he was again. He looks great out there. And I say that today, this week, and tomorrow that might be a completely different story. But for the time being, and for what they've been the last couple weeks, they've been great. I got a couple wins written down here for how many wins teams have had since the in-season tournament. There are 2 teams tied for first. Do you want to take a guess?
The Celtics and the Jazz?
Celtics and Jazz, 15 wins each.
Oof.
Denver's got 14. Clippers have 14. Thunder 13, and the Bucks have 13. You're going to enjoy this back end of the spectrum a little bit more. You want to guess what teams are at the other end that have the fewest wins since the in-season tournament?
Lakers and Warriors?
Lakers have 6 wins. They're 4th to last. There are 3 teams that have less wins than them.
That was dumb. It's got to be the Spurs and the Pistons. Or maybe the Wizards.
Wizards 4, Spurs 4, Nets 4.
Ooh.
Yeah, not looking good. Not looking good for those teams. But hottest team in the league, I think at this point, is Boston and the Utah Jazz. How about them Jazz, man? Making some noise. I was talking about how we wanted Memphis to be the team to chase and kind of put a little bit of pressure on Golden State and the Lakers. Well, the Jazz are already there, and they're doing it right now. This is pedal to the metal right now. They've won, like, I think 14 of the last 16, something wild. But I don't know how long this can go. I don't even know what the direction this team is going in. They're just winning. Like, what do you think they should be doing? Should they be continuing with this roster? Should they be making moves? Should they be trading for more assets, going more in on this year? Like, it's a very interesting scenario to be there. They're kind of a successful rebuild, but they're very much still in the rebuilding mode. Like, this isn't even close to being a polished product. What are we doing in Utah?
I'm gonna trust whatever Danny wants to do, but I could see maybe a couple moves here and there, and trying to make a little bit of a run, and maybe a little bit ahead of schedule. They torched the Pacers last night, and I think it was last week that they slammed the Bucks at their place, where just a couple of times you're expecting the Jazz to get beat, or at the very least it's all right, they're up now, but they're never going to hold on to this. But then I'm seeing some of these scores, and it's wait, this is midway through the 4th, and they're up 20.
Look, they're getting it done. Lauri Markkanen looks great. I know he's in a whole bunch of trade rumors. I think he's untradeable at this point. Like, I think you're crazy if you're moving on from him. I think he's a piece at this point that you're just never. If you trade him, you're going to spend a long time trying to replace him. Like, that's just not. I don't think he's a piece you move. Everyone else, though, I think is kind of fair game. The John Collins thing is interesting, and the Kessler thing is interesting because they don't all seem to play together very well. But we'll see. We'll see where that kind of all boils down to. Last NBA story I got here. There was a trade. I don't know if you heard, between Detroit and Washington. 2 teams really trying to make improvements really fast. Trying to make the most out of the year. Danilo Gallinari, Mike Muscala heading to Detroit, Marvin Bagley and Livers heading to Washington. I don't know what this deal really does for any team. Is this really story? I mean, what are we doing here? These are two of the worst teams. They didn't really even get better in this deal.
I really liked Marvin Bagley at Duke. I really thought he had one of the fastest second bounces that I'd ever seen. I really thought that he was just really springy, kind of in the Rob Williams mold. I really thought that he was going to be good in the NBA. That has not really been the case. I think this is more a just, I don't even know what you should call it, but like the Pistons just, it's not just the play on the court, it's also in the front office. They signed this guy that for more of a contract than they needed to, and then it didn't work out for them. So they had to attach players and 2 second-round picks to get off of the contract. So this is something that bad teams do. They sign the wrong guys that then they have to use draft capital to get out of those holes, and it's just unfortunate that's Marvin Bagley.
Too bad for Marvin Bagley. Not looking great. Draymond's back. Anything to add for Draymond's return?
They got beat. They got beat by the Memphis Hustle, the G League team. Gigi Jackson, two-way player, most points scored. He got to talk to Shaq after the game. He was so excited. He's the youngest player in the NBA. Great news for him. I always liked Gigi Jackson because he committed to UNC and then he realized I absolutely do not want to play here, and he got out of there. So I like him. But Draymond came back and they still stink.
They got a lot of problems there. There was a lot more than just missing Draymond. The Chris Paul thing's not great. I don't know what moves they have. And the more they sink, the more I think they run out of options for moves. It's going to be a rough one for them. We'll be back next Monday. I believe we'll be back on schedule next week. Thank you as always. Make sure you like and subscribe. Spotify, YouTube. Little of column A, little of column B.
Little column A, little column B.